Hey everyone. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment, letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It really helps YouTube recommend more stories like this one to you. Alright, let's jump right in. I should have known the second we rented the damn thing. It looked too perfect, too shiny. Like one of those photoshopped, curated travel brochures that pretend every road trip is a dreamy escape. I wasn't even sure why we went through with it. We could have flown, stayed in a hotel, and had a normal vacation. But no, we decided to be adventurous, to see the country from behind the wheel. Big mistake. Huge mistake. The day we picked up the RV felt like any other. I wasn't expecting anything to go wrong. I'm not sure what I was expecting, honestly. Maybe the novelty of driving a mobile home across the country with my best friend Sarah, who had a little too much enthusiasm for spontaneous trips. But from the moment we pulled out of the lot, something felt wrong. I kept hearing strange noises from the back, like something shifting. A creak, then a low thud. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw nothing. But I still felt like we weren't alone. I kept my eyes on the road, chalking it up to the fact that it was an old RV. Maybe the sound was just the pipes or the fridge working itself loose. But every mile, that feeling only got worse. I tried to ignore it. Sarah was all smiles, blasting music from the speakers, humming along like she didn't have a care in the world. She was always like that, carefree to the point of oblivion. It was endearing in a way, but it also made me paranoid. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. When we stopped for the night in some tiny roadside town in the middle of nowhere, the tension started to peak. We parked the RV near a little diner, its neon sign flickering in the dying light. The gravel crunched beneath our boots as we walked to grab dinner, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the place. There was no one in the diner but the waitress, who gave us this long, calculating stare when we stepped in. "Two?" she asked, her voice a little too sharp. I nodded, uneasy. Sarah didn't notice, of course. She was already rambling about the food. As we ate, I noticed that the waitress never once smiled. In the silence, it was like everyone was holding their breath. There was no chatter, no clinking of silverware. Just Sarah talking a mile a minute, and me trying to ignore the feeling that the air was heavier than it should have been. The windows were fogged up from the inside, and when I wiped one off, I saw nothing but a black blur on the other side. No streetlights, no cars. It was then I realized we hadn't seen a single car for hours. We left the diner quickly, Sarah gushing about how cute the little town was, while I struggled to shake the feeling that something was wrong, something off. When we returned to the RV, the doors were locked. Both of us were sure we had left them open. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I didn't say anything, though. I didn't want to freak Sarah out. I was starting to wish I had. That night, the noises in the RV started again. Creaking, thumping, like something, or someone, was in the back. I tried to ignore it, but my skin prickled. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, the sound of my own breath too loud in my ears. There was something wrong with the RV, I just couldn't place what it was. At around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, the kind of steps that didn't belong in an RV, especially when we were parked in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't sure if Sarah was awake or not, but I couldn't bring myself to wake her. Something told me I shouldn't. My heart raced as the steps drew nearer, moving from the back of the RV toward the front, toward where I was lying. There was no one there, but the sound was unmistakable. Someone, something, was walking inside the RV. I couldn't breathe. I just lay there frozen. Every fiber of my being told me to run, but I couldn't move. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against my chest, and I realized with growing dread that the footsteps had stopped right by the bed, just outside my door. Then it was quiet. I waited. And waited. But nothing. I'm not sure when I finally passed out. Exhausted, too scared to open my eyes. Too terrified to even breathe too loudly. When I woke up the next morning, Sarah was still asleep, curled up in the corner of the bed, unaware of what had happened. And yet, I wasn't relieved. I wish I could tell you it was all just a bad dream. I wish I could say that I made it up in my head. But I didn't. The worst part was what I found when I stepped out of the RV. The campsite, the one we had parked next to, was completely abandoned. No fire, no other vehicles, nothing. Not even a sign that anyone had been there, and still there was that feeling. That watching feeling. I didn't tell Sarah, not then. I figured it was just nerves. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake it. And that's when the RV started doing things. Little things at first. The lights flickering, the fridge clicking on and off at odd hours, the locks on the cabinets that would be tight when I left them but loose when I returned. And the noises, always the noises. At first it was just thumping from the back. But soon I started hearing whispers. I'm not crazy. I'm not. It started small, like a voice just barely audible over the hum of the engine, and then it grew. One night I woke up to the sound of a voice in my ear, right in my ear. Get out. The words were barely a whisper, but I heard them clearly. Get out. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. But the voice was so real, so damn clear that it left me paralyzed. I could feel it. Someone was in the RV with me. I wanted to run. I wanted to just grab Sarah, haul her out of the RV, and drive off into the night. But I couldn't. I didn't want to scare her. I didn't want her to think I was crazy. I had already started second-guessing myself. But the thing is, it wasn't just the RV that was messing with us. It was everything. The roads got worse. The towns got weirder. It was like we were being pulled off the map, into places that didn't exist. Places where no one had ever heard of Route 66. No one had ever seen a map. No one could help us. That was the first sign. The first real sign that whatever we were dealing with wasn't just some faulty wiring or a bad engine. There was something else. We kept driving. We didn't stop. Neither of us said a word about it. But the tension was so thick I could barely breathe. By the time we reached the next town, I had no idea where we were. The GPS had stopped working hours ago, and the road signs were fading into nothing. All we had was the rumble of the RV and the distant sound of whispers in the dark. And that's when I saw it. The sign. The one that said, "Welcome to nowhere." I didn't stop the RV. I didn't want to. But I didn't have a choice. It was like the RV was driving itself. The next thing I knew, we were parked in front of a house that didn't look like any house I had ever seen. Something was so off about it. The shutters were falling off, the porch sagging like it was about to collapse. It looked abandoned. I turned to Sarah, about to say something, when I noticed she was staring out the window. She wasn't staring at the house. She was staring at the thing standing in the yard, and it was staring right back. The thing in the yard wasn't human. I mean, it looked like a person at first. But the longer I stared at it, the more wrong it felt. I don't know how to explain it, but there was this hollowness about it. It was like a silhouette, but it wasn't casting any shadow. No face, no features, just this dark shape, standing absolutely still in the middle of the yard. I didn't want to turn around and look at Sarah, but I could feel her eyes on me. I didn't say anything, didn't breathe, just kept my eyes glued to the thing in the yard. Is it real? Sarah's voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. I nodded, though I wasn't sure myself. It felt wrong, so wrong that my whole body was on edge, like I was being pulled into some deep, suffocating pit. My heart hammered in my chest, and I swear the air in the RV got thicker, almost like I was breathing underwater. I glanced at the rearview mirror, but there was nothing behind us. Just empty road. The thing in the yard hadn't moved. "We should go," I said, trying to sound calm, but my voice cracked in the middle of the sentence. There was no reason to stick around. None at all, but Sarah, she was just staring. She was fascinated by it. "What is that?" "Who do you think it is?" I didn't want to answer her. I didn't want to think about it. But I couldn't stop myself. "I don't know," I whispered. I don't know." Then, out of nowhere, the thing moved. It didn't walk, it shifted. Like it was gliding across the yard, moving faster than anything should, no sound at all. And it wasn't heading for the house either. No, it was heading straight toward us. I slammed the gear into reverse before I even thought about it. "Get down," I shouted, voice tight with panic. Sarah froze, looking at me in confusion, but I didn't wait for her to react. I put my foot on the gas and the RV lurched backward, tires squealing against the gravel. I couldn't look in the rearview mirror, couldn't bring myself to see what was behind us. But I could hear it. The faintest scraping sound, like something dragging along the road, following us, getting closer. I didn't know where to go. There were no streetlights, no signs, just darkness swallowing everything around us. My pulse was hammering in my throat, and every instinct screamed at me to leave. But I couldn't. Not while I still felt that presence, that feeling of being hunted. I drove faster. The headlights cut through the night, barely illuminating the road ahead, but I didn't care about the road. I cared about what was coming. "Stop!" Please stop! Sarah screamed, her voice high-pitched, frantic. I can't take it anymore. I slammed on the brakes, jerking us to a halt. I didn't know why I stopped. Maybe I thought I could gather myself. Maybe I thought if I just sat still long enough, whatever was following us would go away. But I knew better. It was too close. Before I could even say anything, Sarah jumped up from the bed and threw open the door. She was out of the RV before I could stop her, running into the night, her arms flailing as she screamed for help. My chest tightened. I wanted to run after her, grab her, shake some sense into her, but I was frozen. The door swung shut with a sickening thud and I felt it. I felt the air shift. There was no longer just one presence. There were multiple. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. I had to think. I had to do something. But all I could hear were the whispers again. Low, too soft to make out, but everywhere. It was like they were in the air, in the very fibers of the RV, crawling under my skin. Get out, they whispered. I finally opened the door, though I was shaking so badly I thought I'd collapse. But as soon as I stepped outside, I felt it again. Those eyes watching me from somewhere in the dark. The hair on the back of my neck prickled and my stomach churned. I had to find Sarah. I couldn't leave her out there. I stumbled into the yard, tripping on the uneven ground. The silence was deafening, thick and unnatural. There was no wind, no crickets, no animals, just a heavy, oppressive quiet that was pressing in from all sides. Then I saw her. She was standing by the side of the house, her back to me, staring at the porch like she was waiting for someone. Her arms were hanging limply at her sides and she didn't move when I called her name. Sarah, Sarah, I shouted, panic rising in my throat. She didn't turn around. I reached out for her, almost to the point of dragging her back to the RV. But when my hand brushed her shoulder, she flinched, jerking away as if something had shocked her. Don't touch me, she whispered, her voice distant like she was somewhere far, far away. Sarah, what are you talking about? I grabbed her by the shoulders and spun her around. What's going on? You're scaring me. Her eyes were empty, blank. There was nothing behind them, no recognition, no emotion, just this hollow void staring back at me. Don't, she repeated in that same eerie, lifeless tone. You're not supposed to be here. My heart dropped to my stomach. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't Sarah anymore. She wasn't the same person. And the more I stared at her, the more I realized something was horribly wrong. Before I could say anything else, her eyes flicked to the side. She looked at the house, at the front door, and the next thing I knew, she was walking toward it, no, gliding, her feet not even touching the ground. I grabbed her arm, yanking her back, but she didn't even flinch. We need to go. Sarah, now, please, we need to. But then, the door of the house creaked open. I don't know what I thought I was going to find inside. Maybe I thought it was another person, maybe a family that could help us, maybe someone who could explain what was happening. But the door opened, and the darkness inside swallowed everything whole. No lights, no movement. Just a black hole, and then I heard it. The voice again. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a scream. Get out! It was the same voice from before, only now it was louder, more insistent, more furious. That was when I felt it. The presence behind me. It wasn't in the yard anymore. It was right there, just inches away, breathing in my ear. Get out. I pulled Sarah back, nearly tripping over myself in the process, and I didn't even stop to think. I didn't look back. I just ran. We didn't stop until we reached the RV. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I didn't care if Sarah screamed at me. I didn't care about anything except getting the hell away from that house. We tore out of there, but the whispers didn't stop. They followed us inside the RV, crawling under my skin, into my ears, into my head. And when I looked into the rearview mirror, I saw the thing. The shape. It was standing at the door of the house, watching us leave, but it wasn't alone anymore. There were more of them. I thought about stopping somewhere, trying to call for help. But I knew, deep down, that no one could help us. I couldn't escape. Not from them, not from whatever the hell was haunting this RV. And when I looked at Sarah, I saw it in her eyes too. She was already gone. I'll never forget the first time I picked up a hitchhiker. It was stupid. I know that now, but at the time I just wanted to be helpful and she seemed harmless enough. Looking back, I should have trusted my gut. It was around 3 a.m. I was driving along a desolate stretch of highway, just me and the road for miles, when I saw her. She was standing by the side of the road, hunched over in that way people do when they're waiting, as if she were trying to stay warm. I was tired, exhausted really, and I'd seen the sign for a rest stop a few miles back, so I was already debating whether I should pull over or just push through to the next town. When I saw her, I didn't even hesitate. I've heard all the stories, but in that moment, I convinced myself that it would be fine. She didn't seem threatening. She was just a young woman in a coat, her head down like she was trying to shield herself from the wind. So I pulled over, and when she looked up at me, I saw her face. She had this hollow look in her eyes, like she'd been crying for hours, but there was something about her expression, something off, that made me hesitate. It was subtle, a shift in her eyes, like she was aware of something I wasn't, but she said, "Could you give me a ride to the next town, please?" There was something about the way she said it, desperate but controlled, that made me nod too quickly without thinking. I opened the door for her, and she slid in. As soon as she was in the car, the temperature seemed to drop, and I couldn't help but notice how pale her skin was, how thin she looked under that oversized coat, but she didn't seem to care, just sat there staring out the window. I tried to make small talk, to ease the weird tension I was feeling, but she barely responded. I figured she was just tired. I didn't know how long we were driving before she finally spoke again. Her voice was quiet, distant. "Where are you headed?" "Just trying to get to the next town," I said, trying to sound casual. I was about to pull over at that rest stop back there, but figured I'd keep going. She nodded but didn't say anything else. It was like she was lost in her thoughts, staring out at the dark, empty highway ahead of us. The silence wasn't uncomfortable at first, but after a while, it felt like it was closing in on me. I could feel my palms starting to sweat, my eyes flicking to her every now and then. But she was always staring out the window, never looking at me. It was around the time I passed the rest stop sign that I felt the air in the car shift. I couldn't place it, but something felt wrong. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I just had this overwhelming sense that something was off, like I was being watched. I told myself it was just the isolation of the road playing tricks on me. "You know," she said, suddenly breaking the silence, "I used to live in that town." "The one up ahead," I glanced at her. "Really? That's a small world." She nodded, but there was a strange sadness in her eyes. "Yeah, it's where I'm from." I didn't say anything after that, not sure what to make of it. It was starting to feel like this was one of those encounters I'd look back on and regret. Then, just as I was about to turn on the next street, she said something that made my stomach drop. "It's funny how people always stop for someone who's stranded," she murmured, like she was talking to herself. "They never ask why they're out here in the first place." I looked over at her, about to ask what she meant, but when I did, she was staring at me, her eyes wide and almost too intense, as if she was trying to see right through me. My throat went dry and my foot instinctively slammed the brake. We were still on the road. Just miles of pavement stretching out in front of us, no town, no lights, nothing. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice cracking. My pulse was racing now, and I couldn't shake this overwhelming dread that was pooling in my stomach. She didn't respond at first, just kept staring at me, and then very slowly she turned her head toward the window. "I used to live here," she whispered again, more softly now, as though it was a memory she was revisiting, but not anymore. I had no idea what she was talking about, but a part of me felt like I didn't want to know. I could feel the darkness around us now, like the road was stretching on forever, and the town she spoke of was nowhere in sight. Just endless empty highway. Suddenly she turned to face me again, and her expression had changed completely. Gone was the tired, distant look. Her eyes were wide now, frantic. "Stop the car. Pull over now. I didn't know what to do." Her voice wasn't pleading anymore. It was demanding, urgent, like she knew something I didn't. "Pull over," she screamed, her voice high, panicked. I didn't stop. I couldn't. It was like my brain short-circuited for a moment. I kept my foot on the gas, trying to shake off the panic. But the closer we got to the next turn, the more her screams grew louder. My hands were shaking, my knuckles white on the wheel, and I could feel the weight of her eyes on me, like she was willing me to stop. But I kept going. And then, out of nowhere, she went quiet. It was almost worse than her screaming. I glanced over at her. Her eyes were fixed on me, but her mouth was barely moving. It was like she was mouthing something, and I could swear I heard her whisper, "You should have stopped." Just then I felt it, a sudden jerk, like the car had hit something. The wheel spun hard to the left and I barely kept control. Swerving onto the shoulder of the road, the engine sputtering. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging as I slammed on the brakes. Everything went silent. I could barely catch my breath, my chest tight with fear. I turned to the girl beside me, but she was gone. She had completely disappeared. I blinked, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, but no. She was gone. I couldn't understand what happened. The door was still shut, her seatbelt was still fastened. I grabbed for my phone, trying to call someone, anyone, but the signal was dead. The lights from my headlights cast long, trembling shadows on the road, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I got out of the car, my hands shaking as I tried to make sense of what was happening. I walked around the car, checking the back, looking for any sign that she'd just slipped out or hidden somewhere. There was nothing. Not even footprints. That's when I noticed it, the street sign. The one I'd passed without a second thought when I first pulled over. It said, "Welcome to Crescent Falls." The same town the girl had mentioned, except that I knew I had never passed through it. Not before, not now. I turned back to the car, my heart racing. I had to get out of there, but as I reached for the door handle, I heard something. A voice, soft, faint, but unmistakable. "You should have stopped." I froze, and then before I could even process it, the car engine started up on its own. I didn't wait. I ran. I ran all the way back to the highway, looking behind me, but the car was already gone. I didn't know where it had gone, but I wasn't about to find out. When I finally made it to the nearest town, the first thing I did was go to the police. I tried to explain what happened. I told them about the hitchhiker, about the voice, about everything. They just looked at me like I was crazy, and when I asked about Crescent Falls, they said there was no such place. Not anymore. It's been a few weeks now, and I haven't gone near that highway since. But every time I close my eyes, I hear it. That whisper, "You should have stopped," and I don't know if I'll ever stop hearing it. I didn't go back to that stretch of highway, not after the things I'd seen, the things that still felt like they were following me. It was like a shadow had attached itself to me that night, lingering just out of sight but always there, waiting. When I finally got to the police station, I was a mess. My hands were shaking, my mouth dry, and my whole body felt like it had been put through a blender. But what could I even say to them? I couldn't explain the girl's disappearance, the way the car started on its own, or the way Crescent Falls didn't exist. Not when I knew for sure I had passed a sign that night. I gave them every detail, every question I had about that night, about the strange girl and the voice and the feeling that the entire road had been out of place. But the officer just stared at me, a look of disbelief creeping into his eyes. His partner kept typing away at the computer, barely acknowledging me, but I could see the way he kept glancing up every so often, the corner of his mouth twitching as though he was trying to keep from laughing. "Sir," the officer finally said, his voice flat, "we've got no record of a Crescent Falls, and we don't have any reports about a girl matching the description you gave. It's probably just some late-night exhaustion or a prank. You're on the road a lot, right?" I nodded, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. The last thing I wanted was to look insane. It's not like I could show them the sign I'd passed or prove what happened. The only thing I had was a feeling, that awful, awful feeling that it wasn't over. They gave me the standard spiel. "Call us if you remember anything. Blah, blah, blah." But as I left, I knew they weren't going to help. No one would. I was on my own with whatever this was, so I did what any sane person would do. I tried to forget. I went back to my life, tried to get on with it. I even took a road trip to clear my head, though I don't know why I thought that would help. I still couldn't shake the memory of the hitchhiker, her wide, hollow eyes staring at me in that cold silence. But everything I did, every road I took, only made things worse. It was like I was being pulled back to that highway, to her. About a month later, I was driving through another small town. I was trying to shake off the weird vibes from before, just trying to enjoy the drive, you know? The sun was setting, the road winding around hills, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I was getting back to normal. But then something caught my eye. There was a sign. It was one of those old faded signs, the kind you'd almost miss if you weren't paying attention. But I saw it clearly this time. It was at the side of the road, right at the edge of the town. "Welcome to Crescent Falls." I slammed on the brakes. I was still a couple miles from town, but my heart had already skipped a beat. How could this be possible? This sign was old, weathered, like it had been standing for years. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what was going on. But the longer I stared at that sign, the more I realized that I didn't know if I was going crazy, or if I was about to drive into something I couldn't escape. I couldn't ignore it. I had to know. Against every ounce of common sense I had left, I turned onto the road that led to the town. The further I drove, the more I felt like I was being drawn in. Every turn felt like it took me deeper into a place I didn't belong, like I was trespassing somewhere I shouldn't be. When I reached the town, I was too scared to get out of the car. It looked wrong. Nothing about it felt right. It was like I was looking at an old photo, something out of place, stuck in time. The streets were empty, no cars, no people. Even the houses looked like they'd been abandoned for years, their windows shattered and the paint peeling off the sides. I drove slowly, scanning the dark windows, but there was no sign of life. No one moving, no dogs barking, not even the wind stirring the trees. Then I saw it. The diner. It was exactly the same as I remembered. The neon sign buzzing with a sickly flicker. The glass windows fogged up from the inside, and just like last time, the door was slightly ajar. I should have known better. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to see it for myself, had to know what was going on. I parked the car, and before I even thought about it, I was out, walking toward the door. The moment I stepped inside, a chill ran through me. It was too quiet, like the air itself had been drained of any warmth. The bell above the door rang softly as I entered, but there was no response. No waitress, no cook, no sounds of clattering dishes or low murmurs of conversation. Just silence. I stepped further inside, looking around, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. Everything was in its place, right down to the dusty booths and the sticky menus on the tables. But there was no sign of life. Not a single person in sight. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps. Faint but unmistakable. I froze, my blood running cold. They were coming closer, slow, deliberate. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see what was coming toward me, but my body was moving against my will. Slowly, I twisted my head. It was her, the hitchhiker. She stood there, her face the same as it had been that night, but now, different. The look in her eyes was darker, deeper, like she had been waiting for me, like she had been calling me here all along. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but I couldn't move. My feet were glued to the floor. She opened her mouth, and for the first time I heard her voice clearly, the one I'd only heard in whispers before. "Why didn't you stop?" she asked. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if I could. I wanted to tell her I was sorry, that I didn't mean to leave her out there, but I knew in my gut that whatever she was now wasn't human. And just like that, she smiled. It was the kind of smile that made my blood run cold, the kind you'd see right before something bad happened. Then, without another word, she vanished. No sound. No trace. I couldn't breathe. I ran out of the diner, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the car keys, but when I looked back, I swear I saw her standing in the window, watching me. I tore out of there, not daring to look back. I've been driving ever since. I don't know where I'm going anymore. But I know one thing for sure, she's still out there, waiting for me. And I don't know if I'll ever escape her. Every time I stop the car, I hear it, that whisper. "Why didn't you stop?" And now I know. It's not just a question, it's a warning. I should have known better than to take that road. I mean, everyone warns you about it. Everyone knows it's the one you're supposed to avoid. But when you're running on fumes, both in the car and in your life, you start ignoring the obvious. I just wanted to get home. I just wanted to make it to the next exit before I ran out of gas. It was late. Like middle of the night late. The kind of late where the road feels like it's just stretching on forever. Like there's no end in sight. No other cars, no lights, no nothing. Just me and the road. I'd been driving for hours trying to push past my exhaustion. Trying to ignore the warning signs my brain kept throwing at me. Tired, hungry. My phone was dead. And I hadn't seen a gas station in at least 50 miles. But then out of nowhere I saw the sign. Dead Man's Curve, next 3 miles. I laughed to myself. Stupid, right? Who names a curve that? It's like they want you to be scared. And the truth is, I was already freaked out. But it was late. I was tired. So I just kept driving. I wish I hadn't. It started with the road. The sign wasn't lying. This curve? It was a beast. The kind of bend that makes you grip the steering wheel harder. like it's daring you to mess up. My tires screeched a little as I took the turn, the road slick with rain, but I managed. I told myself I was fine, just had to slow down. No big deal, except there was something else, something off. I felt it in my gut deep down, like someone was watching me. I shook my head, trying to shake it off. It was just the isolation, just the road messing with my mind. But then I saw it, the headlights ahead of me. At first I thought it was another car coming around the bend. But it wasn't. It was too bright, almost like the lights were too much, flooding the road in a way that didn't seem natural. And then it hit me. There was no car, no silhouette of a vehicle, just the headlights hovering in the darkness. My heart skipped, my hands tightened around the wheel. And that's when the voice came. It was faint at first, like it was carried by the wind, but it was clear enough for me to make out. Stop. I froze. My foot slammed on the brake and the car jerked forward, almost throwing me into the steering wheel. But there was no one. Just those damn lights and the voice. The voice that didn't belong to anyone. The voice that was still echoing in my ears. Stop. I didn't know what to do. I should have kept driving. I should have gotten the hell out of there. But something in me told me I couldn't just keep going. Something in me knew I had to stop, so I did. I pulled the car over to the side of the road, heart pounding, feeling my breath catch in my chest, and then I waited. I don't know how long I sat there. The only sound, the rain tapping against my windshield, the eerie silence pressing down on me like it was suffocating. I was too scared to look around, to check the rearview mirror, to even move. But my mind kept racing, trying to make sense of the voice, of the headlights, of what the hell was going on. That's when I saw the figure. It was small at first, just a blur in the distance moving toward me. But as it got closer, I could make out the details. A man. A tall, thin figure with long hair and an old tattered coat that looked like it had seen better days. His face was hidden in the shadows, but I could see the outline of his features. Sharp, gaunt, like he hadn't eaten in weeks. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stared, my heart pounding harder in my chest. He was getting closer and my hands started to sweat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive away, but I was frozen. Completely frozen. The man didn't stop. He just kept walking, his footsteps echoing in the quiet, slow and deliberate. When he reached the side of my car, I was too scared to look away. I had to know who he was. I had to understand what was happening. And then, just as I thought he was going to reach for the door handle, he stopped. He didn't look at me, didn't even glance in my direction. He just stood there staring straight ahead at something I couldn't see, something I couldn't understand. The silence between us stretched on forever. "Help me," he whispered, his voice raspy like he hadn't spoken in years. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to do, how to respond. I should have driven away. I should have left him behind, but then he said something else. Something that made my blood run cold. "You're not supposed to be here," and that was it. The lights, the man, the voice, it all came rushing back to me. I was on the wrong road. I was in the wrong place. And something was telling me that I wasn't supposed to make it out of this alive. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just sat there paralyzed, my eyes locked on him, waiting for him to do something, anything. But then, just as quickly as he'd appeared, he turned and started walking back into the darkness, like he hadn't even seen me. I didn't wait. I slammed the car into gear and tore out of there, tires screeching against the wet asphalt. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. And as I drove away, my hand still shaking on the wheel, I could hear the voice again. Louder this time. "Stop." I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not again, but I kept driving past the curve, past the sign. And I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, the lights of civilization finally offering some kind of comfort. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't shake the image of the man, of his hollow eyes and the voice that followed me. The next day, I Googled Dead Man's Curve. And what I found made my stomach churn. It wasn't just some spooky legend. People had died there. Multiple people. In crashes that no one could explain. The curve was notorious. People always said it was haunted, that it was cursed. But I never believed it. Not until now, but the worst part, the part that still haunts me every time I close my eyes, is the last thing I read on that page. One of the victims, the very last person to die on that curve, was a man who had walked out into the middle of the road just before the crash. His name? Jonathan Klein. The same name as the man who stopped in front of my car, and when I looked up from the screen, I swear to God, I saw him standing outside my window. But when I blinked, he was gone. I've been trying to make sense of everything ever since that night, but the more I think about it, the more tangled it all becomes. At first, I thought maybe it was just a dream, a terrifying hallucination caused by exhaustion and stress. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, the images, Jonathan Klein's face, the voice, the curve, kept coming back. Every time I shut my eyes, it was there, haunting me. After I read about the crash victims, I tried to shake it off. I told myself, it's just coincidence. A name is just a name, right? But the problem was, Jonathan Klein wasn't just any name. I Googled more. I had to know more about the victims, the accidents. Every report, every story I read, the details about the crashes were eerily similar. Drivers losing control of their cars on the curve, swerving off the road, crashing into the trees. No one ever survived. The curve was cursed, they said. But it wasn't just the crashes that disturbed me. It was the people who were reported to have died there. And the weirdest part? None of them were from around that area. They were all passing through just like I had been. So I started digging deeper. I went to the library. I spent hours reading old newspaper clippings about the curve. And then, I found something I wasn't expecting. There was a woman. Her name was Ellen Parker. She was the first to die on Dead Man's Curve decades ago, long before the accidents started happening regularly. In her obituary, it said she had been found wandering the highway in the middle of the night. She had no memory of where she'd come from, no memory of what had happened to her. Ellen Parker was also the first person to die after the crash, her car veering off the road in the same spot where I'd pulled over. I couldn't shake the nagging, feeling that something about that woman, her wandering the road, her memory loss, had a connection to what happened to me that night. The idea that something or someone was causing these accidents to happen. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I read, the more I realized there was a pattern that was still happening. People who passed through the curve were vanishing, but not just physically. It was like their spirits were left behind, trapped on that stretch of road. Some of them still lingered there, waiting for the next victim. That's when I started to understand what was going on, and why Jonathan Klein had spoken to me the way he did. The last person who had died on Dead Man's Curve had been a man named Tim Holloway. He had gotten lost late at night, just like me, and his car had gone off the road in the same spot. The report said his body was found in the woods, though no one could figure out why he'd been walking in the middle of the road to begin with. Tim Holloway was reported missing a week before I found out about the accident. He had been seen asking for directions at a gas station not far from the curve, but by the time the police started searching for him, his body had already been found. There was no explanation, no reason he should have been out there at that hour. When I looked closer at his photo, though, my heart sank. Tim Holloway's face looked eerily familiar. He had the same haunted eyes, the same gaunt features as the man who had stopped in front of my car, the same man who whispered to me in the dark. The moment I realized this, something inside me snapped. This was no coincidence. This was not just a strange series of accidents. This was intentional. The road, the curve. It wasn't just dangerous because of the tight turn or the slick roads. It was dangerous because it wanted to trap people. It wasn't just a place for people to lose control. It was a place where spirits were left behind, cursed to wander forever, to pull others into the same fate. I had to get away from it. I had to leave, but it wasn't that simple. The next day, I decided to go back to the curve. I wasn't going to let it defeat me. I wasn't going to let it trap me, like it had trapped all those other people. So, I got in the car, took a deep breath, and drove straight back to Dead Man's Curve. I had to face it, right? When I approached the curve this time, I swear the air felt different. Thicker, heavier, like the road was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a mistake. I slowed down. I made the turn carefully, trying to remember everything I'd learned about the road, about the people who had died there. And that's when it happened. The lights. The same bright, blinding headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. I tried to convince myself it was just another car. Just a car passing through. But as the headlights grew closer, I could see the outline of the vehicle, only. It wasn't a vehicle. It was more like a shape. Something too bright to look at directly, too wrong to be a car. It was like it was gliding toward me. The voice came again. Stop. This time I didn't freeze. I didn't hesitate. I slammed on the gas, tearing away from the curve, my tires screeching as I pushed my foot harder into the pedal. But the headlights kept chasing me, getting closer and closer, the voice now loud and sharp in my ears. Stop. I glanced at the rearview mirror, heart pounding, but there was nothing. The headlights were gone. No car, no figure, nothing, just an empty road. But I didn't stop. I kept driving, faster than I ever had before, praying I wouldn't crash, praying that whatever was chasing me would just stop. I don't know how far I drove before I saw the sign for the next town. I didn't even slow down. I passed it, then the next sign, then the next, all the way out of that cursed stretch of road. I didn't stop until I was safely back in my apartment, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline, from the terror that still crawled up my spine like fingers in the dark. That was 3 days ago. I haven't been back to Dead Man's Curve, and I don't think I ever will. But the thing is, every time I close my eyes, I see the lights. I hear the voice. And every now and then, when I'm driving through a quiet stretch of highway, I can't help but check the rearview mirror. Just in case, because I know it's not over, not yet. I should have known better than to stop there. But when you're tired and the road is endless, the promise of a warm bed and even warmer food can make you do things you'll regret. This is my warning. Never ever stop at a rest stop that feels too quiet. It was late, somewhere around 2 a.m. I'd been driving for hours, hoping to make it to the next town before I passed out at the wheel. The road had been straight and empty for miles. The only thing to keep me company was the hum of the engine and the occasional sound of a car passing on the other side. The silence in my car was deafening, and no amount of music or podcast could drown out that thick, suffocating quiet. I saw the sign. Rest stop, 1 mile. The little light bulb in my head flickered on. I had been going too long without a break. I could feel my eyes closing against my will, my back aching from sitting for so long. So I decided to pull over. Big mistake. When I arrived, it was exactly what you'd expect from a roadside rest stop. A few old picnic tables, a couple of vending machines, a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for one other car parked at the far end. No lights were on except for the dim streetlights flickering overhead. I parked my car and sat there for a second, debating whether or not I should just power through and keep going. But then a small part of me whispered, just take a break. It's fine. Nothing's going to happen. I grabbed my bag and headed toward the restroom. As I walked through the deserted lot, I could feel it, a sense of unease creeping in. The air was thick, sticky, the kind of air that feels like it's holding on to something, waiting to spill it all over you. I shook my head, trying to brush off the feeling. The moment I stepped into the restroom, it hit me. The smell. It wasn't bad. Not like the usual stale, musty odor you get in old rest stop bathrooms. No, this was different. It was the kind of smell that made your stomach turn like something rotten was just out of reach, something you couldn't see but could feel lurking just beneath the surface. I walked up to the sinks and splashed some water on my face, trying to shake off the fatigue, trying to clear my mind. But as I wiped my face with a paper towel, I heard it, a noise that made my blood run cold. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I froze. My heart started hammering in my chest, and I found myself instinctively glancing over my shoulder. There was no one there, but I could still hear the footsteps, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't the sound of someone else coming in. It was too slow, too calculated. I stood there for a moment, breath caught in my throat, waiting for something, anything to happen. And then the door to the restroom creaked open. I didn't turn around immediately, not at first. I just stood there, my heart racing. Finally, I mustered the courage to look up into the mirror, and that's when I saw her. A woman standing in the doorway, her figure dark against the weak light spilling in from outside. I couldn't make out her face at first, but I could see she was wearing a long coat, too long for the warm weather. Her hair was wet, hanging in damp strands around her face. She didn't speak, just stood there staring at me. My mouth went dry. Can I help you?" I asked, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. She didn't answer. I swallowed, trying to force the panic out of my chest, and took a few steps toward the door. I had to get out of there. Something wasn't right about her, something I couldn't quite place. But before I could reach the door, she spoke, her voice a whisper that cut through the air. "Are you leaving?" I stopped dead in my tracks. The way she said it, like she already knew the answer, made my stomach flip. I looked at her face then, really looked at her. Her eyes were dark, too dark, and there was something cold about her expression, something that made me want to turn and run. But I couldn't. My feet were frozen. "Oh yeah, I was just heading out," I said, trying to sound casual. "Sorry, didn't mean to make you wait." She didn't move. Her gaze never left me. And then, in a voice that was somehow both quiet and chilling, she asked, "Do you ever wonder if anyone ever leaves?" I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling a little now. She stepped closer, just a few inches, but it felt like miles. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as she tilted her head, her eyes locking onto mine. I felt like she was peering inside me, reading every thought, every fear, every doubt. "People don't leave," she said softly, almost like she was trying to comfort me. "They just stay, forever, in places like this." The words didn't make sense. I started backing away, my feet moving on their own. But she didn't stop. She followed me, slow and steady, like she had all the time in the world. I pushed past her, my breath catching in my throat, and I bolted for the door. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My legs were shaking, but I made it to the car, got inside, and slammed the door shut. I didn't even bother buckling my seatbelt. I just put the car in drive and hit the gas. The road outside was empty still. But the weight of what had just happened lingered in the car like an oppressive fog. I glanced into the rearview mirror, expecting to see the dim lights of the rest stop fading behind me, but that's not what I saw. There was a car behind me, a rusty old sedan. The headlights were dim, just barely illuminating the road ahead. I should have ignored it. I should have kept driving. But I couldn't help myself. I kept glancing in the mirror, watching as the car stayed behind me, matching my speed, just close enough that I could see the shape of someone in the driver's seat. I pressed the accelerator harder. The car behind me did the same. I tried to speed up, but so did it. It stayed right there, just out of my line of sight. That's when I felt it. The feeling from before, the one I couldn't shake. The feeling that something was wrong, that I was being followed. I could hear the faint sound of the tires on the road, even though I was already miles away from that damn rest stop. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. But the car kept following, and then in the distance I saw it. The same rusted sedan sitting quietly on the side of the road. Empty. The headlights were still on, but the car was abandoned. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I kept driving. But I haven't been able to shake the feeling that something was still with me, and that I'll never truly leave. I thought leaving that rest stop would be the end of it. I thought once I hit the highway and left that place behind, it would fade, like a bad dream I'd wake up from. But nothing works like that, does it? You can't just escape something that feels like it's been following you. For the next few hours, I pushed the gas pedal to the floor. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my eyes glued to the road, not daring to look in the rearview mirror again. I drove and drove past towns that seemed to blend together, past the glow of the distant city lights, anything to get away from that eerie rest stop. But the road felt like it was closing in on me. The silence was suffocating. I'd convinced myself that I was just being paranoid, that I was imagining things. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on something, anything, I couldn't shake the image of the woman in that bathroom. Her dark eyes, her voice, and that strange, unsettling question, "Do you ever wonder if anyone ever leaves?" I didn't know what she meant, but I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want to find out. I didn't stop for gas until I saw the next town. My mind was a whirl of thoughts, none of them good. I pulled into the station, my hands still shaking from the drive, and I forced myself to get out. It was like I was running on autopilot, just moving because I had to, not because I wanted to. The gas station was quiet, too quiet. The clerk was behind the counter, staring blankly at a screen. He barely looked up when I walked in. The bell above the door rang softly, but the sound seemed to echo too loudly in the stillness. I grabbed a bottle of water, my nerves already on edge, and walked up to the counter. "Can I get a pack of cigarettes?" I asked, my voice sounding hoarse, even to my own ears. The clerk finally looked up at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw something in his eyes. Something wrong. But then he blinked, and it was gone. "Sure," he said in a flat tone, as though he had already said it 100 times that day. As he reached for the cigarettes, I glanced outside through the window. My heart skipped a beat. There was a car parked just outside the station. It wasn't anything special, just an old sedan. But the headlights were on, and there, sitting behind the wheel, was the same figure I had seen in my rearview mirror earlier. The same shape. The same shadow. The man. The one from the rest stop. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, staring at him, watching as he sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, as if he was waiting for something. My heart raced in my chest, and a cold sweat broke out across my skin. I didn't know what to do. I felt the clerk's eyes on me, but I couldn't tear myself away from the window. And then I heard the voice. It was soft at first, barely a whisper, but it was unmistakable. "Are you still running?" I snapped my head back toward the counter, but the clerk didn't move. He just kept staring at me, his hands still resting on the counter like he hadn't heard anything. The silence between us felt suffocating. I turned back to the window and the car was gone. Just like that, in the blink of an eye, I ran out of the station, my heart pounding in my throat. I barely remembered paying for the water or the cigarettes, just that I had to get to my car. I had to get away. When I reached my car, I didn't even think. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut and locking it even though no one was there. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, my foot on the gas before I'd even finished pulling out of the station. I drove for what felt like hours, my mind whirling with confusion and panic. The road seemed endless, and the further I went, the more I felt like I was just driving in circles. I kept checking my rearview mirror, waiting for the headlights to appear again. But they never did. The car, the man, was gone, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being followed. I don't know how much time passed, but eventually I saw another sign. Next rest stop, 10 miles. My gut twisted. The last thing I wanted was to pull into another rest stop. Not after what had happened, but I had no choice. The gas light came on, and I knew I couldn't make it to the next town without stopping. So I pulled in, my body rigid, my mind telling me not to, don't stop. But my body couldn't fight the need for fuel. This rest stop wasn't much better. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. The sign for the bathrooms was rusted, and the only light came from the flickering overhead bulbs. The parking lot was empty except for a few scattered cars, all parked at odd angles. As I stepped out of my car, I noticed something. There was a figure standing in the shadow near the bathrooms, half hidden in the dark. For a second, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but when I took a few more steps, I realized it wasn't just a trick. It was her, the woman from the rest stop. She was standing in the shadows, her coat flapping in the wind, her eyes glowing in the dim light. "Why are you still here?" she asked, her voice low, almost a hiss. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I wanted to run. I wanted to get in my car and drive far, far away, but I couldn't. My body was glued to the pavement, paralyzed by the sound of her voice. "Why won't you leave?" she repeated, stepping forward inch by inch, her expression blank. "You know, you can't run forever." I could feel the weight of her gaze like it was pressing down on me, suffocating me. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there, rooted to the spot. Then, with a sudden, sharp movement, she vanished into the darkness like she had never been there at all. I snapped out of my trance, turning around to get back in my car, but before I could make it, the door of the rest stop bathroom creaked open. The sound was hollow, eerie, and that's when I heard it again. That same whisper, "You can't leave." I didn't look back this time. I didn't dare. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and drove away faster than I'd ever driven in my life. I didn't stop until I reached the next town, where I pulled into a brightly lit hotel parking lot and checked in. The clerk there was friendly, and for the first time in hours I felt a small sense of safety. But when I got into my room, I turned on the TV to try and distract myself. It was on the news, some local coverage about a highway crash. A woman had been found wandering on the road late at night. The police report said she was disoriented, confused, and claimed to have been lost for days. But what stuck with me the most was her name, Ellen Parker. It took me a second to realize why it sounded so familiar. She was the first victim on that cursed curve, the one who had been wandering before the crash, the one whose spirit had never left. And as I stared at the screen, I heard that whisper one last time. You can't leave. And this time I knew. I wasn't meant to. Not yet, not ever. I don't know how it happened. I wish I could tell you I saw the signs, that I realized something was wrong before it was too late, but I didn't. And now I'll never be able to explain how it all went down, but I'll try to anyway. Maybe someone out there will understand, or at least believe me. It started off simple enough. I bought a used car, a decent sedan that ran well enough for me to get around town. I didn't think much about it, just a cheap way to get to work and back. That's all I needed. It was a little older, sure, but it seemed fine. The first few weeks went by without issue. I drove it to work, to the grocery store, ran errands. Nothing special, but there were small things I couldn't ignore. Like how the air conditioning would randomly kick on or off without me touching the settings. Or how the car would make strange noises when I was stopped at a red light. Not loud, just enough for me to notice, like a faint click, click, click that always stopped when I started driving again. At first, I brushed it off. You know, just the quirks of an old car. But it wasn't the noises that bothered me. It was the way it started acting like it had a mind of its own. One night, I was driving home from a late shift at work. The streets were empty and the lights were low, casting shadows that seemed to stretch on forever. I was half distracted, thinking about what I needed to do when I got home, when I felt the car pull to the left. I hadn't touched the wheel, but it was like the car decided it wanted to drift. I jerked it back into the lane, but then it happened again. The wheel pulled hard this time, dragging me toward the curb. I cursed under my breath, but the weirdest part was how the car seemed to fight me. The more I tried to correct the wheel, the more it seemed to want to steer me somewhere. But where? I couldn't make sense of it. It wasn't like I was losing control. This wasn't just bad driving. This was deliberate. I pulled over and turned off the engine, thinking maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was imagining things. I even got out, walked around the car, checked the tires, looked under the hood. Nothing seemed wrong. It looked like a perfectly normal car. But when I got back in and started it up again, the engine roared to life, louder than usual. As I shifted into drive, the car lunged forward, harder than it should have, almost like it was hungry to move. My stomach dropped. The next few days were more of the same. The steering would pull, the engine would rev like it was excited, and there were strange sounds. But every time I checked, everything seemed fine. The car was running normally. Nothing was broken. That's when the weirdness escalated. I was driving down an isolated stretch of highway one evening. It was around midnight, just me and the road. No cars in sight. Then out of nowhere, I felt a sharp tug. The car veered to the left, and before I could react, it swerved across both lanes toward the shoulder, almost hitting the guardrail. My heart slammed into my throat as I fought to regain control. When I finally got it back into my lane, I noticed something in my rearview mirror. It wasn't a car. It was just lights, bright headlights, so bright they seemed to blind me, flashing in my mirror. But there were no cars behind me. I told myself it was just the glare, maybe some reflections. But then the car did it again, swerved to the left, heading toward the ditch. And that's when I realized something was wrong. The steering wheel wasn't moving like it should have. It was stiff. The car was pulling with a force I couldn't explain, like it had a mind of its own. I tried to stop. I pressed the brakes, but the car didn't slow down. It kept speeding up. I begged the car to stop. Please, just stop, I thought. But it didn't. It was like it was fighting me, like it was alive, pulling me toward something I couldn't see. That's when I saw it. In the distance, off to the side of the highway, I could see something, or rather someone standing there. A figure. Dressed in dark clothes, their face obscured by shadows. I had no idea what I was seeing, but my hands were slipping off the wheel as the car pulled harder, the brakes still useless. I tried to scream, but my throat was too tight. The car was getting closer to the figure, faster and faster. I was screaming now, desperate, trying to wrench the wheel back, trying to force the car to stop. But it wasn't listening. Just as I was about to crash into the figure, I blacked out. When I woke up, the car was parked on the side of the road, completely stopped. I was still gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. The engine was running, but everything was quiet. I slowly turned my head toward the passenger seat, expecting to see the figure I had almost hit. But there was nothing, no one, just an empty road. I don't remember how I got home after that. I think I just drove in a daze, barely aware of what was happening. But I know one thing. When I pulled into my driveway, the car did stop. It did turn off. It did park itself. I didn't drive it after that. I left it in the driveway and I tried to forget about it. But I couldn't. No matter how far I went, no matter how many days passed, the feeling stayed with me. The feeling that the car was watching me, waiting. And then, 2 weeks later, I saw the car again. It was parked across the street, just a few houses down, headlights on, the engine running. I wasn't sure it was my car, but it looked like it. It felt like it, but this time the door was open. I don't know why I went over to it. Maybe I thought I was crazy. Maybe I thought I'd imagined everything. But when I got closer, I saw it. The driver's seat was empty. No one was there. I was about to turn around when I heard it. The car roared to life. The engine revved louder than it ever had, the headlights blinding me. I turned and ran, but the car started moving. Following me, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was run, my feet slamming against the ground, my mind screaming to get away. I reached the end of the block and I turned, my heart pounding, expecting the car to stop. But it didn't. It kept going. The engine was roaring louder now and I could hear the tires skidding on the pavement, chasing me. I ran faster, but it was gaining on me. And that's when I realized the car was alive. It wanted me. It needed me. I don't know how, but somehow I found my way to the nearest police station. They didn't believe me, of course. I was just some crazy person who'd watched too many horror movies. But the thing is, it wasn't over. The car's still out there. I know it. I see it sometimes parked outside my house waiting. But the worst part is, I know it's not done with me yet, and it's coming for me. I thought leaving town would make it stop. I thought if I just moved far enough away, the car wouldn't be able to find me. But I was wrong. So wrong. After that night at the police station where they treated me like I was insane, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I sold the car. That car, the one that had been chasing me, the one that had been alive, to a dealer who assured me it would go to a good home. Someone who could fix it up and restore it. That's what I told myself. I had to get rid of it for my own peace of mind. I drove halfway across the state to start over. A new town, a new life. I found a small apartment in a nondescript complex in a town where I didn't know anyone. I thought maybe if I just got far enough away, I could forget about everything. I could go back to a normal life, pretend like that nightmare had never happened. I didn't even want to drive anymore. Every time I got behind the wheel of a car, my heart would race. Every stoplight, every curve in the road, every time a car got too close to me, my body would tense up, waiting for the pull, the lurch of something pulling me off track. I didn't trust myself anymore, let alone any vehicle, but I couldn't avoid it forever. I needed a car to get to work, so after a few weeks of catching the bus, I broke down and bought a new one. Nothing fancy, a simple sedan, nothing that could possibly remind me of that thing. I told myself it was just a car, and that nothing could happen. I didn't tell anyone what had happened to the old car. I couldn't. Who would believe me? People would think I was crazy, and I wasn't sure I could explain it anyway. It wasn't just a car. It was alive in a way. It had a mind of its own. And every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I was sure I'd see the headlights of that damn car again. But I was trying to move on. I had to. A few months passed. I went to work. I came home. I made new friends at the bar down the street. Life was settling in, and I started to feel a little bit better, a little bit safer, until one night. It was a Tuesday, and I had just finished my shift. I was exhausted, the kind of tired that weighs on your body, makes your bones feel heavy. I'd been meaning to stop by the grocery store, but when I left work, all I wanted to do was get home and go to bed. I turned my car down the same familiar streets heading toward my apartment when I felt it. A sudden sharp jolt. The car lurched forward like something had grabbed it. I glanced at the dashboard and the speedometer, the tachometer, the lights. Everything seemed normal. The engine was purring like it should, but the car was shaking. My heart leapt into my throat. No, this wasn't happening. Not again. The car started pulling to the left, fighting me, veering off course. I turned the wheel with all my strength, trying to keep control, but it didn't listen. It was steering itself again. I could feel it. Something was inside the car, making it do things. I slapped the brakes, but the car didn't slow down. Instead, it sped up, pushing forward like it was determined to get somewhere. I couldn't breathe. I could hear the engine roaring louder than it should, the tires screeching, and I could feel the pressure, the pull, trying to drag me off the road. My hands were shaking, my grip tight on the wheel as I fought to stay on the pavement. The car didn't want me to drive it. It wanted something from me. It was like it knew where I was going. I looked in the rearview mirror. There, in the distance, was the headlights. The bright, glaring lights growing closer and closer, but there was no car. Just those headlights pushing forward, as if they were attached to nothing, like they were floating toward me. It was the same feeling I'd gotten before, like something was coming for me, hunting me. "Not again," I whispered, barely able to choke out the words. The road was getting curvier, narrower. The headlights behind me were getting closer, filling my mirror with blinding light. I was panicking now, breathing hard, barely able to focus on the road. I tried to turn off, but the car wouldn't let me. The wheel refused to move, and that's when I saw it. A sign. I couldn't read it at first, and it was too blurry, too far away. But as I got closer, I realized it was a road sign. The same kind you'd see for a small town or a highway. But the words on it, the letters, they didn't make any sense. It wasn't a name. It wasn't anything that should have been there. Dead Man's Hill. I slammed my foot on the brake, but the car didn't stop. It just kept going. Faster and faster as the road wound tighter and tighter. The sign was now right in front of me, and I could see it clearly. I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn. It was as if the car was determined to take me to the same place it had before. I was screaming, pulling the wheel hard to the right, trying to force it to stop. But nothing worked. The car was pulling me forward like it was dragging me straight into a nightmare. The lights behind me were now blinding me. I couldn't even see the road anymore, and then, just as I was about to go over the edge, everything stopped. The car slammed to a halt, the engine sputtering, the lights flickering, and I felt the weight of my own breath in my chest. I looked around. I was still on the road, but the world felt different. Quiet. Too quiet. The headlights behind me were gone. The road was empty. The car was still, but then I heard it, the sound of an engine. And not mine, it was coming closer. The sound grew louder, faster, and then I saw it, the headlights. The same ones. Only now the car had no body, no shape. Just the lights moving toward me like they had a life of their own, like they were coming from nowhere. I was trapped. The car in front of me knew me. It knew who I was, where I was, what I had done, and it was coming. I can't explain how it happened, but the next thing I knew, I was back in my apartment. I don't know how I got there or how much time passed, but when I looked in the mirror, my face was pale, my hands still trembling. I looked outside. There was no car, but I could feel it. In the pit of my stomach, I knew. It wasn't over. The killer car was still out there, and it was waiting for me. I've always had this thing for long road trips. Something about the endless stretches of highway, the quiet hum of the engine, and the feeling of just going. It clears my head, you know? So when I finally got the chance to drive down Route 66, I jumped on it. It was a bucket list thing for me. The iconic American road, the nostalgia, the roadside diners, and the small towns with their weathered charm. I had it all mapped out, but I never thought it would be the one trip that would haunt me forever. It was late summer when I started, and I drove out from Chicago, planning to take my time, stopping wherever I felt like. I didn't care about the time, it was just me and the road. The first few days were perfect. I stopped at some famous diners, took way too many photos of neon signs, and had good conversations with locals who were surprisingly chatty for strangers. But when I reached the part of the highway that ran through Arizona, things started to feel different. The towns were smaller, more abandoned looking. I hadn't seen a car for miles, and the air was thick with the kind of heat that presses in on you, making everything feel heavy and still. I should have been more careful, but I was too caught up in the allure of being on Route 66 to realize how isolated I really was. One evening, as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, I passed a tiny diner on the side of the road. It wasn't anything fancy, just a little shack with neon lights flickering in the window. and a sign that read Last Chance Diner. I was starving and figured I'd grab a bite before finding a place to crash for the night. The name seemed quirky, but I didn't think much of it. It's just a diner, right? I parked the car and walked inside. The place was dimly lit, with faded booths and the smell of stale coffee hanging in the air. There was only one person inside, a waitress in her mid-40s with a face that seemed to have been carved from years of hard living. Her eyes were sharp and she barely looked up when I entered. I slid into a booth, my stomach growling, and she finally turned to take my order. She had this strange, distant way of talking, like she wasn't really listening to me but also didn't care enough to ignore me completely. "What'll it be?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I'll have the cheeseburger and fries," I said, glancing around the diner. There was no music playing, no chatter, just the sound of the ceiling fan spinning above. "Cheeseburger." "Coming right up," she muttered and shuffled off to the kitchen. I looked out the window. The night had fully set in, and the highway stretched out in both directions, completely empty. Not a single car in sight. After a while, the waitress returned with my food. She slid the plate in front of me and then just stared at me for a beat too long. "You're passing through, aren't you?" she asked, her voice lower now, more serious. "Yeah," I replied, unsure where this conversation was going. "Just making my way down 66. She nodded, her gaze flicking toward the door, then back at me. Her lips twitched into something that might have been a smile or a grimace. "You better keep going then," she said, her voice now laced with an edge I hadn't noticed before. "The road ahead. It's not a place for strangers," I laughed, trying to break the tension. "I'm just passing through. Nothing to worry about." But she didn't smile back. Instead, she just stood there staring at me, her eyes wide, too wide, like she was seeing something I wasn't. "You don't know what's out there," she said, almost to herself. "You don't know what happens to people who stop here. People who take the long road. It gets them, changes them." I stood up, uncomfortable now. "I'm just here for a meal, lady, not a ghost story." But she didn't move. "I've seen it happen before. You'll feel it too in a minute." I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. Something about her words, "you'll feel it too," made my skin prickle with unease. I turned to grab my jacket from the back of the booth when I heard it. A low hum, faint at first but growing louder, vibrating through the walls. It sounded like an engine revving, but not from outside. It was coming from within the diner itself. I turned to look at the waitress, but she wasn't there. My heart slammed in my chest. I moved toward the window, trying to see if there was a car pulling up, but there was nothing. No headlights, no sound from the road, just that hum. I turned back to the kitchen. It was dark now, the lights flickering on and off. And then I saw it. The jukebox in the corner was playing, but the song was all wrong. It wasn't a real song. It was distorted, like a broken record, repeating the same line over and over. "Keep driving, keep driving, keep driving." I felt the urge to leave. I needed to get out of that place, and fast. But when I turned toward the door, the waitress was there, standing in front of it, her eyes locked onto mine. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper now. I pushed past her, not caring what she said, and ran out of the diner. I didn't even grab my jacket. I bolted to the car, started the engine, and hit the gas without looking back. But as I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. The diner was still there. But it was different. The lights were off. The neon sign had flickered out, and standing in the doorway was the waitress, staring at me, her face pale, her eyes empty, like she'd been waiting for me to leave. I kept driving, my heart thudding in my chest, trying to shake off the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The road ahead was empty, just the black asphalt stretching out in front of me. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure standing at the side of the road. A person, but they weren't moving. Just standing there, waiting. The headlights from my car illuminated them for a split second, and I saw their face. It was the waitress. But her face was different. Twisted. Her mouth stretched into a grin that didn't belong on a human face. And her eyes, those hollow eyes, were staring straight at me. I swerved the car, my heart in my throat, nearly losing control. The road felt like it was closing in, the darkness pressing in from all sides. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I looked back at the rearview mirror. The figure was gone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, following me, watching me, waiting for me to make another mistake. I've never told anyone this story. I've never stopped driving either. I couldn't bring myself to stop at another diner, another rest stop. Because deep down I know it wasn't just a ghost story. It was a warning, keep driving. I don't know what happens to the people who stop, but I know I won't be the next one. The strangest thing about the whole night wasn't the ghostly diner or the eerie waitress. It wasn't even the way the road twisted and turned as though trying to swallow me whole. It was the overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone, not just physically, but like something was tied to me, following me. Every mile I drove after leaving the diner, that weight stayed with me, like the air itself was pressing against me, suffocating me with the knowledge that I had crossed a line, one I couldn't uncross. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was just shaken up from the bizarre experience. I mean, ghost stories don't come true, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd left something behind when I drove away. Not just the diner, but something else, something that was now attached to me. For the next couple of days, I kept driving. It wasn't like I had a choice. I was halfway through my road trip, and the thought of stopping and turning around felt even worse than just pushing forward. But it didn't matter how many miles I covered or how fast I drove. The feeling never left. I noticed little things at first. My car would make noises I didn't remember it making before. Groans and creaks, a low hum in the engine that didn't seem right. I'd stop to get gas and the attendant would give me a strange look, like he was about to say something but then decided against it. I stopped at another small town, a place that wasn't even on the map I had, and when I pulled into a diner, another roadside diner, this one called Jack's Roadside Cafe, the waitress at the counter gave me the same exact look as the one from the diner. She didn't smile, just nodded as if she recognized me. Her eyes didn't meet mine as she handed me the menu, and when I asked if they served breakfast all day, she said the same thing the last one had. "You better keep going." The words were a whisper, like she didn't want to be overheard, but I heard them, loud and clear. I couldn't help but think about the waitress in the diner again. I thought maybe I was imagining things, but then I remembered the way she had looked at me, like I was the one who didn't belong, the way she had smiled, or rather grinned, as I drove away. And I couldn't shake the idea that it wasn't just her that was watching me, but the entire road. That night I pulled off the highway at a small hotel in another sleepy town. The place was run down. No lights in the parking lot except for the flickering bulbs above the entrance. But I didn't care. I just wanted to sleep, to forget about what had happened. When I checked in, the manager seemed a little too eager to get me to my room. He handed me the key quickly, not looking me in the eye. "Room 9, he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't think much of it. But later, as I lay in bed, something did feel off. The silence was almost unnatural, too quiet, as if the world had stopped moving outside. I could hear the faint sound of someone walking outside my door, just light enough that I wasn't sure if it was real or if I was imagining it. The door handle rattled, just once, but I convinced myself it was the wind. But then it happened again. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. The rattling came louder this time. Someone or something was trying to get in. The hairs on my neck stood up and I could feel the tension in the room thicken. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just listened, waiting. Then, through the thin walls, I heard it. A soft thud like footsteps approaching. And then, the same voice I'd heard before, the waitress's voice, cold and distant, whispering through the door. "You should have never come here." I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as I scrambled out of bed. I reached for the door, my hand shaking, and I threw it open, but there was no one there. Just an empty hallway, stretching far into the distance. The hotel was deserted, like the rest of the town had vanished in the night. I slammed the door shut, locking it. I couldn't explain it. Was I imagining it all? Was I losing my mind? I didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, too scared to even close my eyes. The entire night passed in this horrible, suffocating silence, and when morning came, I left as quickly as I could, not bothering to check out. I just drove. I had to keep moving, but it wasn't over. The feeling followed me. It was like I had become a part of the story now, a part of Route 66. The next day I passed through more towns, more signs, but they all seemed wrong. The names didn't match what I remembered. The people were odd, too quiet, like they were watching me. I couldn't escape it. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me, even when I was alone. At one stop, I pulled into a gas station to fill up. The attendant was young, maybe in his late teens, with shaggy brown hair and a crooked smile. He asked where I was headed, and I gave the usual answer. Just passing through. He raised an eyebrow, his smile turning into something too wide, too knowing. Don't stay too long, you hear? Not around here. People like you don't last. I didn't ask him what he meant. I just finished filling up and got back in the car. I was about to pull away when I saw something in the rearview mirror. A car. A bright, shining vehicle parked at the edge of the gas station lot just out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't moving. It wasn't really there. But the headlights were on, shining straight into my mirror, blinding me. I turned away quickly, driving off before I could even make sense of what I'd seen. For the next few hours, I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but the feeling it never left. It wasn't the ghost of the diner or the strange people I'd met. It was something about the road itself. Route 66 had become a part of me, and I was trapped in its story, just like everyone else who'd driven it before. I made it to the next town, a place that seemed familiar, but something was off about it. The streets were empty. No cars, no people, just buildings with boarded-up windows like a ghost town. I couldn't even find a place to eat, let alone a hotel. I kept driving, and then in the distance I saw it, the diner, the last chance diner. But when I pulled up, something was wrong. The lights were on, but it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The sign flickered in the window, the same neon glow, and when I went inside, it was empty, just like the last time. The waitress was gone. But the message was still there. You can't leave. That's when I knew. I had become part of the road, part of the story, and there was no escape. I don't really know when it started or even why I kept ignoring it at first. I mean, you don't want to admit that something's wrong, especially when it's happening to you, right? You try to rationalize it. Tell yourself it's just your mind playing tricks. But let me tell you something. When it starts to happen over and over, when it starts to feel like it's all too real, that's when the nightmare begins. It all started with a mirror, a cheap full-length one I bought from an estate sale. I didn't think much of it at the time. It was a little scratched, sure, but it had a certain charm to it, something old and weathered. I placed it across from my bed in the small apartment I was renting. I didn't think anything of it, honestly, but over time I started noticing things. At first it was small. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see something in the mirror, but when I blinked, it was gone. The reflection wouldn't line up right sometimes. It was like the mirror was showing me something that didn't make sense. But I was tired, you know? I told myself I was just imagining it, that it was the light or my eyes playing tricks on me. But then the reflection started moving when I wasn't. I'd walk away from the mirror, and my reflection would stay there for a second too long before catching up with me. And if I turned quickly, it would take a split second too long to follow. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, got worse every time I looked at it. I remember the first time it really hit me. I was brushing my teeth, just doing the usual morning routine, and I looked into the mirror to check if I had anything stuck in my teeth. But when I glanced up, my reflection didn't quite match. It wasn't wrong per se, but it felt off. My reflection smiled at me, this small, almost mocking smile that I wasn't making. It was subtle, just a slight curve of the lips, but it wasn't my smile. I swear it wasn't. I backed away from the mirror, my heart hammering in my chest. I told myself it was nothing, just a bad angle, or maybe I was tired, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. I tried to ignore it. I tried to move past it, tell myself I was overthinking everything. But then, the tapping started. It was the middle of the night, and I woke up to a soft tapping sound. It was coming from the direction of the mirror. I sat up in bed, confused, my heart pounding. I tried to listen harder. Tap, tap, tap. It was like fingernails lightly rapping on glass. I could hear it so clearly, but I didn't dare look. Then I heard a voice. A soft, low whisper, almost like it was coming from the mirror itself. I see you. I don't know how long I sat there frozen, just staring at the reflection of the room in the mirror. But the room was empty. There was nothing there. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I finally got up. I approached the mirror cautiously, my reflection staring back at me. It was just me, right? I reached out slowly, my hand trembling as I touched the glass. The tapping stopped, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when my reflection moved. It turned its head ever so slowly and looked at me, really looked at me, eyes wide and unblinking. And then it smiled. It wasn't a smile like mine. It was twisted, sinister, the kind of smile you see on someone who knows something you don't, something that shouldn't be possible. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stumbled back, almost tripping over the edge of the bed. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining it. My reflection had smiled at me. It was me, but it wasn't. I backed away from the mirror, my legs weak beneath me. The whispers in my head, "I see you, I see you, I see you," echoed in my mind louder and louder. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to tell, so I didn't tell anyone. I thought maybe if I just stayed away from the mirror, everything would be fine. I'd just ignore it. But ignoring it didn't work. Over the next few days, it got worse. I'd catch glimpses of my reflection moving in ways I didn't. I'd see my face twitch, my hands move when I hadn't even lifted a finger. And the worst part? The worst part was when I saw it, my reflection standing perfectly still, staring at me with those dark eyes, waiting. I'd wake up to find myself standing in front of the mirror, eyes locked with my reflection, unable to look away. Sometimes I wouldn't remember how I got there. I'd blink and realize I'd been staring for hours, the reflection never changing, never moving. That's when I knew I wasn't the one in control anymore. I moved the mirror once, pushed it into the corner of the room, hoping that would stop it. But it didn't. It never did. And then, the worst thing happened. I woke up one morning, the sunlight streaming through the window, and I looked at my reflection. But this time I wasn't standing in front of the mirror. I wasn't moving. It was. My reflection stood there, staring at me, its eyes locked on mine. I wasn't the one in control anymore. I was trapped. The reflection smiled again, and this time it spoke. Its voice was low, almost like it had been waiting for me to hear it. "You can't escape." And I realized then, it wasn't just a reflection. It was something else. Something alive. The reflection stepped forward, slowly, as if it were coming through the glass. My body froze, my chest tight with panic. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to break free. But I couldn't move. It reached out to me, its hand pressing against the glass, and then the mirror cracked. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The reflection was still there, but it was different now. It was coming for me, the glass splitting open, the edges jagged and sharp like it wanted to pull me in. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't escape. The last thing I remember was my reflection reaching out. Now I'm not sure if I'm still in my own body, or if I've become part of the mirror. But I know one thing, it's still here. The reflection is still watching me, waiting for me to make the wrong move. And the thing is, I'm starting to feel like I'm not the one controlling it anymore. I don't know how much time has passed since the mirror cracked. Maybe hours, maybe days, I can't keep track anymore. All I know is that something's changed. I don't feel like me anymore, not entirely. When I look at myself, I see the same face, the same eyes, but there's this absence, a void that wasn't there before. The worst part? I can't tell if it's my reflection that's looking at me, or if I'm looking at it. I've stopped sleeping. Every time I close my eyes, I feel the weight of it, the sensation of something pressing against the back of my skull, waiting for me to open my eyes and see it standing there. I haven't gone near the mirror again. I can't. It's in the corner of the room, shards of glass scattered around it like a twisted jigsaw puzzle. But the reflection, it's still there, waiting. It doesn't matter that I moved it because I can feel it. The mirror is just a shell, a barrier between me and it. That's when I realized it's been following me. It was subtle at first. The days would blend together and I'd find myself catching glimpses of something out of the corner of my eye. I'd turn, expecting to see myself in the reflection, but there would be no one there. Just the same empty space. But the longer I went without facing it directly, the stronger the presence grew. I'd hear it too. A soft tapping like fingers against glass echoing through my head. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, but when I turned, there was nothing. That's when I noticed it. My reflection was starting to act differently. It used to mimic everything I did, right? Simple things, raising my hand, shifting my weight. But now it moves at its own pace. It no longer waits for me. It's like it's doing things before I even think about them, and it's getting closer. One morning I woke up to find myself standing in front of the cracked mirror again. I had no memory of walking there, no recollection of even getting out of bed. I just woke up and there I was, but I wasn't alone. The reflection. It wasn't me anymore, it was smiling again. That twisted, mocking grin that I couldn't shake from my mind. But it wasn't just a smile. It was something deeper, something darker. Its eyes, those eyes were wide open, locked onto mine with this unnerving, insidious satisfaction behind them. As if it knew something I didn't. I tried to step back to leave the room, but my feet wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot as if the floor was holding me there. The reflection, it, or whatever it had become, stepped closer. The glass seemed to ripple like a mirage in the desert, distorting around its edges, blurring the line between the mirror and reality. Then I heard the whisper. It wasn't in my head this time. It came from it. From my reflection. You're mine now. I gasped and stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. Mine now? What did that even mean? My legs finally gave out and I fell to the floor, my body shaking uncontrollably. I tried to pull myself away, to get away from that thing, but it felt like it was pulling me in. Like the reflection was dragging me into the glass, wrapping itself around me. I closed my eyes. I screamed. I don't even remember when the scream stopped. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't on the floor. I was standing in front of the mirror, staring at myself. But I wasn't me. I was it. The reflection? The thing that had been smiling at me, and I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My body, its body, wasn't mine anymore. It just stood there staring back at me with that same twisted grin. But it wasn't me anymore. It was something else. Something alive. It was like a puppet, but I wasn't pulling the strings, and that's when I realized the mirror had won. It had taken me, and now I was trapped inside it. There was no way out. There was no escape. I was stuck in that reflection while it walked free. I tried to scream, tried to push against the glass, but it didn't work. I couldn't escape. I reached out, feeling the cold, slick surface of the mirror. It was so close, but it was like I was trapped in a parallel world, a reflection of the real one. And then I heard it again, the whisper. It's your turn now. You're the one who'll watch. I felt something cold against my neck. The reflection, the thing that used to be me, reached up, touching its fingers to the mirror. It was as if it was making contact with me, reaching through the glass. I wanted to scream, to push it away, but there was nothing I could do. It smiled again, that same sick grin, and as it did, I realized something terrifying. It had become me. I was nothing more than an echo, a ghost trapped in a mirror, watching it live my life. It would watch me every time I looked into the glass, and it would always be there, always just behind my eyes, laughing at my helplessness. I'm still here. I can feel it all the time, like a pressure in my chest. I can't escape. I can't look away. Every time I look in a mirror, I see it. It's me, but it isn't. It's the thing that took my place, and it's staring back at me. And I'm the one left behind, screaming in silence, watching it live my life. If you ever feel something watching you from the corner of your eye, something that doesn't quite match, that smile, that reflection that doesn't follow you exactly, it's not you. It's already inside the mirror and it's waiting for your turn. It was a late summer night when I picked her up. I wasn't supposed to be driving that late, honestly. I was already exhausted from work, my eyes heavy, my mind numb. But I'd been on the road for a while and I just needed to get home. Maybe I should have taken a break, gotten a coffee, but I wanted to get back, so I kept going. I didn't see her at first. She appeared out of nowhere, standing by the side of the road in a flowing white dress, her hair pulled back into a tight bun, looking like she'd stepped out of an old photo. I would have passed her if I hadn't felt something pulling me to her. There was no one else on the road for miles. The highway stretched out like an empty ribbon of asphalt. Her face was tired but not desperate. She wasn't waving her arms, no frantic gestures. She just stood there, calm as can be, waiting. I slowed down. The car came to a stop right next to her, the engine humming in the quiet of the night. "Hey, need a ride?" I asked, my voice barely louder than the sound of the wind. She hesitated for a split second before nodding. Her eyes met mine, and something about her expression caught me off guard. She didn't seem scared or grateful, just peaceful, as if she'd been waiting for me. I unlocked the passenger door. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just down the road." she said softly, her voice clear but distant. She didn't say much else, just gave me a quick smile as she climbed into the car, pulling the door shut with a soft click. I watched her settle into the seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I couldn't stop glancing at her. She looked wrong. Not in an overt way, but in that subtle, unsettling way that makes your brain pause, makes you look twice. She was too calm for someone who'd been standing on the side of the road alone at night. The silence in the car stretched on for a while before I spoke again. "You from around here?" She shook her head slightly. "No, I'm just passing through. I didn't ask any more questions." "I mean, you don't question a hitchhiker, right?" It felt too normal. But there was something about the way she said it, her voice soft and almost rehearsed, that made me think she wasn't just passing through. She wasn't just anyone. A few miles down the road, I glanced at the rearview mirror. For a second, I thought I saw something just behind me. But when I looked again, the road was empty. I shook it off, maybe just a trick of the light. I stole another glance at her. She was still sitting there, her hands folded, her face as calm as before. Her eyes were focused on the road ahead, but it didn't seem like she was really looking at anything, like she was looking through it. "Do you mind if I ask where you're headed?" I asked again, this time more out of instinct than curiosity. "I'm heading home," she said, her voice soft, almost sad. I didn't push it. I was too tired, and she didn't seem like someone who wanted to talk. Another 5 minutes passed, and I felt that same strange sensation again, the one I couldn't quite shake. The sense that something was off. I looked over at her, but she hadn't moved. She was still staring ahead, her expression blank. That's when I noticed something else. The air had grown colder. I turned on the heater to warm things up a bit, but the chill didn't go away. In fact, it grew worse, like an icy draft was pouring into the car. I rubbed my arms, trying to warm up, but it didn't help. My breath fogged in front of me, the temperature dropping inexplicably fast. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice suddenly feeling small in the cold silence. She nodded, her eyes never leaving the road. But then she spoke again. "You'll see me again. I'll be waiting." The words felt strange, like they weren't meant for me. They sounded rehearsed, like she was saying something she had already said 1,000 times. Something was wrong. I glanced at her, but when I looked back at the road ahead, I noticed something even worse. The exit sign for the next town was missing. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I'd passed the sign just a minute ago. I was sure of it. I knew the layout of this stretch of highway. It was normal. This wasn't some back road I didn't recognize. I glanced at the clock. The time didn't add up either. How had I been driving for almost an hour, when I was sure I'd only been on the road for 15 minutes? I didn't say anything. I just focused on driving, trying to shake off the unease that was slowly building up inside me. The night was pressing in, the road stretching longer and longer. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, it seemed like there was something behind me, just out of sight. I couldn't stop thinking about the things that didn't add up. The missing signs, the wrong exit, the way the road felt different. And then, as if to confirm my worst fears, I glanced at the passenger seat again. She was gone. There was no rustle of movement, no door opening, nothing. 1 second she was there sitting quietly, and the next, nothing. I slammed the brakes, pulling the car off the road to a stop. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands gripping the wheel tight. I turned to the passenger seat, empty. I blinked, stunned. She couldn't have just disappeared. I looked around. The highway was still empty. I stepped out of the car, looking around frantically. There was no sign of her, no sign that anyone had ever been there. I walked around the car, half expecting her to be standing just behind me, but she wasn't there. The air felt too still. The temperature had dropped even further. It was like the whole world was holding its breath. Then I heard it. A faint sound far in the distance. It sounded like footsteps, soft but deliberate. I turned toward the sound, my blood running cold, and that's when I saw her again. She was standing on the side of the road, the same white dress, her hair pulled back tight, her face serene and almost ghostly under the moonlight. She looked at me, and then she smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile a person gives when they're happy to see someone. It was something darker, a smile that seemed like it was hiding something too terrible to say. And then, before I could move, she turned and started walking away, vanishing into the night. as if she'd never been there at all. I stayed frozen for a moment, my mind racing. Was I dreaming? Was I losing it? I turned back to my car, but I couldn't bring myself to get back in. As I stood there, staring down the empty highway, I realized something. Something terrifying. I was never supposed to pick her up. But now, I was stuck, and she was waiting for me. I don't know where she came from or what she wanted, but one thing is for sure. She's not just a hitchhiker, she's a curse, and she's coming for me again. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to make sense of what had just happened. I stared at the spot where the girl had been standing, the empty road stretching out ahead of me like a never-ending black ribbon, and for the first time in my life, I felt trapped. I had to leave. I had to get away from that road, from whatever strange thing had just happened, but my body didn't move. My legs were stiff, my hands cold and clammy. I wanted to scream, to yell out into the empty night, but I couldn't find the words. My throat was tight. There was no air left to breathe. I turned back to the car, stepping slowly, my legs shaking beneath me. Every part of me screamed to leave, but my feet kept moving at a snail's pace like the road was holding me back. When I got in, I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it without thinking. I started the car, but my hands were shaking so badly it took me a couple of tries to shift the gear into drive. As I pulled away, my mind was still reeling. What had just happened? I glanced in the rearview mirror again, half expecting to see her there, standing in the same spot. But there was nothing, just an empty road, empty highway. I kept driving, pushing the gas pedal harder than I should have, the engine roaring in my ears. But the faster I drove, the more the unease grew. The road felt endless, stretching farther and farther, looping back on itself, dragging me into some kind of twisted maze I couldn't escape. I glanced at the clock. Again, the time didn't make sense. I had driven for nearly an hour, but I swore only a few minutes had passed since I left that diner. It couldn't be possible. Then I saw it. The road sign. It said, "Welcome to Crescent Falls." I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as I jerked the car to a stop. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the sign. I'd never seen this town before. It wasn't even on the map I had in the car. I hadn't passed it on the way out. And yet here I was. The car was parked on the side of a long, empty street that looked like it had been abandoned for years. Old houses lined the road, their windows dark and broken, some of the yards overgrown with weeds. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. I didn't know why I got out, but I did. I stepped out of the car, my feet hitting the cracked pavement with a hollow thud. The silence was oppressive. There were no sounds of birds, no rustling leaves, nothing. It was like I had walked into a town that was stuck in time. I turned around to see my car, the headlights casting long, eerie shadows across the road. But when I looked back to the street, I saw something, or rather someone, moving at the far end of the street. A figure. A tall, thin figure, dressed in a long coat just like the girl. The same girl. I could feel my pulse quicken. My body was frozen in place, rooted to the spot. She was standing there watching me, just like she had at the side of the road. Her face was partially obscured by her hair, but I could feel her eyes on me, piercing through the darkness. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to call out to her, to ask what was going on, but I couldn't find my voice. I could only stand there, staring, waiting, and then she moved. She took one slow, deliberate step forward, and in that moment I realized something terrifying. I wasn't alone. I turned to the car, ready to jump back in, to drive away as fast as I could. But the moment I reached for the door handle, I felt it. A hand, cold, icy, brushed against my shoulder. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I turned around. She was standing right behind me. Her face was now fully visible. She had a pale, almost lifeless complexion, and her eyes were wide open but completely blank. Empty. It was like she wasn't seeing me at all, like I wasn't even there, just staring into space, like her mind had drifted far away. "You should have never come back," she whispered. Her voice was faint, like it was carried on the wind, but it was unmistakable. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. My body felt numb, like I was slowly sinking into the ground. The words she said. They were too familiar. They were the same words I'd heard in the diner. The same words she had whispered before she vanished. "You should have never come back." I stumbled backward, my legs giving out beneath me as I hit the side of the car. My chest was tight, my heart racing. I looked around desperately, but all I saw was the same empty street. The houses, the broken windows, the overgrown yards. No one else. Just her. The girl stepped closer, her hand outstretched toward me. It was too late to run. There was nowhere to go. I took a step back, but she grabbed my arm, pulling me toward her. Her grip was ice cold, and for a moment I thought she might pull me into whatever nightmare she came from. But then, she spoke again, softer this time. "You don't understand. I'm waiting for you." I struggled, trying to break free, but her hold was too strong. I could feel myself being pulled toward her, drawn into her emptiness, her nothingness. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was the feeling of my feet leaving the ground, and then, nothing. A void. When I woke up, I was in the car. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly. My knuckles were white. I looked around in a daze, the world outside blurry, as though I'd been asleep for a long time. But nothing had changed. The road was still the same endless stretch of highway, the same night sky. I looked down at the clock. An hour had passed, but it didn't make sense. I looked around, half expecting to see her again, but there was no sign of the girl. No town. No Crescent Falls. Just me, alone. But then I glanced at the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. The reflection in the glass wasn't mine. It was her. She was sitting in the back seat, watching me, waiting.